Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make a cinnamon swirl coffee cake, and this is what it looks like. This is a soft and moist white cake with a swirl of cinnamon sugar running through it, and then we also put some on top, and when it bakes it becomes nice, hard, and crunchy. So the first thing you need to do is to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius. And we're going to bake our coffee cake in a loaf pan. And then you can, I'm just going to butter. You could spray it with one of those non-stick sprays. What I do is I just melt like a little bit of butter. And then I just use a pastry brush to brush the bottom and the sides. Make sure you do it well. We don't want our cake sticking to the pan. And then what I like to do, just to make sure it doesn't stick to the bottom of the pan, I like to just line it with a little piece of parchment paper. Okay. And now, first thing I want to do is just make our cinnamon sugar. So just in a small bowl, you will need 1/4 cup, 55 grams of firmly packed light brown sugar, and to that I'm going to add 1½ teaspoons, which is 2 grams of ground cinnamon. And I'm just going to mix that together with a spoon. Okay, so now for our cake batter. If you have an electric stand mixer like I have here, use your paddle attachment, or you could use a hand mixer for this. The first thing you will need is 1/2 cup, 113 grams of butter. Have your butter at room temperature. I'm using unsalted. I prefer it, but you can use salted. And I'm just going to beat that until it gets nice and smooth. Okay, simple enough. And next, you will need 1 cup, 200 grams of granulated white sugar. And then I'm going to also add at this point 1 teaspoon, 4 grams of pure vanilla extract. That way the vanilla will kind of mix in there and flavor the sugar and the butter. So I'm going to beat this now on medium-high speed, probably for a couple minutes. I want to get it nice and light and fluffy and well mixed together. Okay, so as you can see, this is what we're looking for. Gets all nice and creamy, smooth, and get some air in there so we have a nice light and fluffy cake. So now, as always, scrape down, the sides and the bottom of your bowl as much as you need to make sure everything is mixed together. So now we're going to add 2 large eggs, one at a time. Have your eggs at room temperature. That would be, if you want to go by weight, that's about 105 grams of eggs. And I'm just going to beat that in. And beat in the second egg. Okay, it's all done. So now for our dry ingredients, I have in a separate bowl here 2 cups, which is 260 grams of all-purpose flour. You may know that as plain flour. To that, I'm going to add 1 teaspoon, 4 grams of baking powder, and 1/2 teaspoon, 2 grams of baking soda, and 1/2 teaspoon, 2 grams of salt. Now, if you use salted butter instead of unsalted, I would just leave out that salt. Now I'm just going to whisk that together. You could sift it if you like. You want to make sure that baking powder and baking soda and salt is really mixed into your flour. Okay, and we will also need 1 cup, 240 milliliters of buttermilk, and have your buttermilk at room temperature. Buttermilk, it's kind of nice in a cake. It gives it a really nice tender, soft and tender crumb. Now you can buy buttermilk. You can buy buttermilk powder now, I noticed. Or you could use sour milk and just as good. And what you do, just take 1 cup, 240 milliliters of just regular milk, add 1 tablespoon of lemon juice to that, stir it in, and just let it sit for about 10 minutes, and you have just as good as buttermilk. So if you don't want to go buy it, that's what you can do. So now what I'm going to do is add the flour in 3 additions and alternate that with the buttermilk. So I'm just going to put, maybe about 1/3 of my flour mixture. I'm just going to slowly beat that in. Okay. Now I'm going to add about half of our buttermilk. Okay, more of my flour. Rest of my buttermilk. And the last of our flour. I am going to give a good scrape here. Okay, that looks good. Not too hard. So now, I always like to give a quick stir just to make sure there's a little flour on the sides. So now what we're going to do, we have that, as you saw, there's a swirl of cinnamon sugar in the center. So what we're going to do is only put half of our batter into the pan first. Now you can just eyeball that, but if you have a digital scale, which of course I always recommend, it's really easy. You just put your pan on there and then just put in 450 grams of your batter. I find that actually a lot easier than trying to eyeball. Okay. And then, let's get that out of the way. And then just take, I don't need that right now. Let's take you take the back of a spoon, or I have an offset spatula, just even that out. Make sure you get in the corners. Okay, and now we're going to put half of our cinnamon sugar. Again, that's maybe about 2 tablespoons, but if you have your scale, it'd be about 28 grams. And just sprinkle that in an even layer. This is such a nice coffee cake, and it stays moist for several days. And then we're just going to put the rest of our batter on top. Now, if you wanted to, you could, with your cinnamon sugar, you could add like some chopped nuts if you wanted to that. But I just like that. The white cake, this vanilla flavored, and then that cinnamon sugar. I really like that combination. And again, just smooth it out. Okay, and the rest of our cinnamon sugar. Now, as you saw, that will have cake, cinnamon sugar, cake, cinnamon sugar. Now, you could just bake it off just like this, but if you want that kind of uneven kind of swirl, what we're going to do, once I finish this here, is you'll either need, like I'm just using a wooden skewer, or you can just use a knife. That's good. And then take that, and I'm just going to swirl it through the batter. And that way we'll get, it won't be like a straight line, which, you know what, there's nothing wrong with that, but this, I think this gives it a little more interest. So now we're going to bake our coffee cake. I find about 55 minutes in my oven. You want to bake it until when you take a toothpick and insert it into the center of the cake, it comes out just clean. Now, everybody's oven is a little different. Some run a little hot, some run a little cool. So I find at least 5 minutes before that, check your cake just to make sure that it's not done yet, and it kind of gives you a gauge of how much longer. But I find about 55 minutes. So our cinnamon swirl coffee cake is done. So I put the pan on a wire rack. We're going to let it cool in the pan for about 10 minutes, and then when we come back, we will take it out. So now to take our cake out of the pan, you can use, I've just have a spatula, or you could use a knife and just run it along the inside just to make sure it's not sticking. So we don't want to leave part of our cake in the pan. And then I got a wire rack here. My pan's still a little hot. So there we go. And I'm going to pull off that parchment paper. And there we go. Our cinnamon swirl coffee cake. So now it's still quite warm, so I'm going to let it cool on the wire rack, and then when we come back, we will try a slice. So our cake, it's ready to cut. So just use a sharp knife. You could use a serrated knife as well. Oh, I'll cut a couple slices here. Still a little warm. There you have it. Isn't that gorgeous? You get that vein or swirl of the cinnamon sugar, plus nice. It's kind of nice and crisp, that cinnamon sugar on the top. Now that will soften if you cover and store it overnight. This crust that right now is quite crispy will soften, but it will still be good. It's really, really good. You have it's really soft and moist, nice vanilla flavor to it. And then you have the cinnamon sugar running through and on top. It's just perfect with the white cake. So try this. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.